I, Dr. Renu Tomar, welcome you all to the series of lecture which we have been covering on the topic integrating social and political life as social science. Friends, this is part 3 of the same series. If you remember that in this topic previously we have tried to cover the pedagogical aspects and we have also talked about how to cover the social sciences for the primary students particularly. Just to recap whatever we have covered in our previous lecture, let me go back to whatever we talked about. Friends, we talked about the pedagogical aspects of teaching of social sciences. Just to recap, the first principle, we covered 10 principles in all. The first principle which we discussed was that the student should be educated in such a way that they understand. Secondly, teacher should be positive and encouraging. Integration should be horizontally as well as vertically. Then there was another pedagogical principle which was very important, that curriculum should be improved by the experienced and indigenous staffs. The health and mentality are primary factors for education. The next principle was that we should be working at promoting effective learning formulation of syllabus in such a way that the learning is effective. Another principle which we talked about was that safety and multicultural awareness should be at the center of teaching social sciences. Another important pedagogical principle was that students should have their part in enhancing the curriculum. That means the curriculum framework or curriculum framing should be participatory. Another pedagogical principle which we discussed was that the social sciences should be taught as multidisciplinary collaboration. Friends, getting back to whatever we have covered in the past, now let us try to focus on the methods which we can adopt in teaching social and political life as social sciences. Friends, what can be the methods which we can adopt for teaching of social sciences? The first method, which is very important and relevant to the teaching of social sciences, is scientific or experimental method. As all of us know, the scientific and experimental method consists of observation, recording, classification, then hypothesis. After hypothesis, we verify from the data, and then we predict, and on that basis of we give certain conclusions, suggestions. What does observation means? Observation means looking at things. How do we look at things? We can look at the things as an external person or as an internal person. So, depending upon how we are looking at things, we have two kind of scientific or experimental method which is adopted in teaching social sciences. First is spontaneous. Spontaneous means that the phenomena in question is spontaneously happening, as stargazing by the astronomer, or a sociologist is witnessing a riot. So, this is spontaneous. Here the researcher would be internal, the teacher or the student whosoever is studying or teaching would be internal. Second is controlled. What does controlled observation means? Controlled observation means that experimentation takes place when the phenomena can be observed in the circumstances devised by the observer himself. How can now the question arises that how can a person, the person who is conducting experiment, can devise a circumstances on the basis of which he can observe and accordingly conclude and then suggest certain decisions or certain observations. Experimentation is generally possible in the natural sciences like physics and chemistry. Is social behavior really capable of being treated scientifically? This question has been questioned again and again when it comes to teaching social sciences, and let us agree on the fact that this method has also been used successfully over very wide range of situations and types of behavior. However, whenever we are conducting this kind of observation, we have to keep in mind that every possible precaution needs to be taken to conceal from the subject that observation is in progress and that measurements are being made. Because friends, if the subjects, that means the people who are being observed, are aware of the fact that they are being observed, then there would be the reactions or the responses will be manipulated by the people who are being watched, because this is psychological. Then in the second stage in this scientific method is that after you have observed, you record all the data obtained in the observation, and here recording must be very accurate and objective. Friends, objective is a very important term. Then the third stage in the scientific method is the classification. Once the facts are observed and recorded, then we classify. After having classified, the next stage is of proving hypothesis, which means giving some sort of possible explanation for the correlation between the acts classified. But it is not necessary that our hypothesis should be correct. If the hypothesis is found to be incorrect, then what? It has to be discarded and a new one is to be formulated. This process goes on till its truth is verified. Friends, let us take an example. Like in the physical sciences, this kind of controlled observation would be very easy. In the laboratory, watching the chemicals or the physical entities, particularly in the physics, would be very easy. It would be easy even for an astronomer, watching, recording, and then accepting or rejecting the hypothesis. But when it comes to sociology and psychology, the predictions can be rough and they can also vary from one subject to another, because there are a whole lot of complex variables which are involved whenever we watch human beings. In fact, even in the case of a zoology or the experimentation which is done on animals, then also we do have the varied responses, and when it comes to human mind being so complex, the responses would be varied as well as complex. So, sociologists have to take care of the fact that if they are adopting experimental method, then they should be very objective in their own way. Apart from that, the subject shouldn't be knowing that they are being observed. So, in the case of controlled conditions for observation and comparison experimentation, these factors become very important. Friends, to give an example of from the sociology itself, that how we are going to conduct this kind of observation or this kind of study. Suppose we have two age group of people. We first of all we observe that even the kids do steal and the elders also steal. But what is the difference between the two? Like, if we want to ensure that stealing is a social norm or is it a moral norm, like we are trying to find out that whether the stealing is socially introduced amongst the humans or it is something with which we are born. So, when we are trying to understand the morality, the issue of morality and immorality, there was a very interesting research which was done on two age group. One age group was of the children who were between the 3 and 4 year old. Another research was done between the grown up people who were between the age of 20 to 24. In the research, what the researcher did was that he created a room through which he could watch, but the people who were inside, they couldn't see that they are being observed through the camera and also by the people at large, by the researchers. So, in the case of a 3 to 4-year-old children, the teacher who was teaching them, she took a bowl of chocolates and also a bowl having lot of apples. She put both of them in the classroom and she told the students that they will be given 5 minutes break, and during that 5-minute break they have to eat apple and no child should be taking chocolates, because chocolate will be given to them later on or after the class is over, and that would also be decided by the fact that if they have learnt, they have shown some kind of a learned behavior. So, when the teacher left the classroom, the kids who were left alone, it was observed that most of the children, out of 30, in fact 29 went and took away chocolate, and even the child who was left, she also wanted to pick the chocolate but didn't. Similar experiment was done with the people who were in the age group of 20 to 24. There, in the room, the teacher, after having taught the students, they said कि after having studied only, they would be allowed to use their phones. The phones were kept in the class and they were on the switched off mode, and the teacher said, you revise and I will be back within 20 minutes. Nobody is allowed to use the phone in her absence, and if a student is found using the phone, the student will be punished for it. There also the similar kind of behavior was seen, that the students took away their phones, used it, and before the teacher was back, it was again switched off and kept back. In both the experimentation, when the teacher came and questioned the students, what was found was that in the case of a 3 to 4 year kids, they did not take it as stealing, as something which was unsocial or crime. All their concern was that they were told not to do something, but they did it. So, and in the case of a 20 to 24, they felt the guilt because they were caught doing something which they were not supposed to do. So, here the researcher tried to find that as far as the guilt is concerned, that grows, and it is a social component which is introduced by our society as a part of human behavior. So, whenever we talk about the controlled observation, we have to keep it in mind that the people who are being observed, first of all, we are very objective. Secondly, they are not aware that they are being observed. Otherwise, they wouldn't be showing the same kind of behavior. It has often been seen that if the people observants get to know the sample who is being observed, if they get to know that they are being observed, their behavior has been observed to have changed. So, in the case of a physical science, friends, it is very easy, but in the social sciences, we can only come out with the rough prediction, and that can also be varied from one system to the another, and it will also be near to accurate only if we ourselves have been very objective, as well as we have taken care of the fact that the observation of the people is not in the knowledge of the people who are being observed. In fact, whenever we talk about experimental method, when it comes to sociology, sociology is not able to use experimental method as it is too complex. So, as George Cornwell Lewis has stated, we cannot take a portion of the community in our hand as the king of. Bildergang took Gulliver, tried it in different aspects and place. It is a different positions in order to solve social problem and satisfy our speculative curiosity. So, as Gulliver was being controlled, we are not capable of controlling the community or the society. That is why the experimental method hasn't been found to be very appropriate, particularly when it comes to sociology. In psychology, it is found to be appropriate, but when it comes to sociology, it hasn't been found to be appropriate. As a matter of fact, the study of sociology is limited largely to the descriptive analysis. It provides logical description and explanation of important social institutions. These analyses may contain some elements of scientificism, but they do not provide scientifically verifiable evidence and theories. So, there would be certain element of scientific experimentation, but they cannot be verified, or the evidence or the theories are not scientifically verifiable. Friends, what is the problem of objectivity? Whenever we talk of objectivity, objectivity stands for remaining true to one's mission and not be influenced, affected or dominated by any other feeling and factor. This is the basic problem which in case of sociology we observe. Objectivity needs scientific attitude, consistent thinking, stark pursuit of accurate data, stubborn determination to analyze the facts, analysis of cause and effect, open mind free from any kind of bias, likes or dislikes, and penetrative insight for deep observation. Now, another method, let us talk about the another method which is very much important for studying social sciences, historical method. What is historical method? Historical method consists of a study of events, processes and institutions of past civilization for the purpose of finding the origin or antecedents of contemporary social life and thus of understanding its nature and working. So, here what the researcher or the teacher is doing or the student is doing is that in this method we are utilizing the secondary data which exist in form of books or in form of suppose in statues or in the form of buildings or in the form of coins, clothes. So, that is being utilized as to understand how the events preceded after one another, how the institutions have evolved in their present scenario, and what kind of institutions were there in the past as far as the past civilization is concerned. So, meanwhile, almost any discussion of political science or economics must discuss historical trends and how the distribution of resources has changed over time. Sociology need not do it. History, as far as history is concerned, as all of us know, is the study of events that have shaped the political and economic system which we have today. And much more to it, let us take an example from the three disciplines. Let us try to understand how each discipline is tied to it. Historical facts as contained in the histories, diaries, etc. may be revealing, but they have little use for scientific investigation. They may not be able to answer all the questions that may be raised by the people who are trying to understand the social dynamics. For example, sociologist. Here we are trying to equate the different aspects of social sciences. So, historians may, as researcher, may provide certain facts, but they cannot be investigated scientifically. But how can this method help the sociologist? This method, first of all, let us talk about what kind of help sociology cannot provide as far as history is concerned to the history. Scope of sociology cannot be limited to the study of facts provided by history. This is clear to all of us. Similarly, sociology, the present scenario like the experimental method and all, they are also adopted along with the historical investigation to come to the fact that they are also equipping each other, and also they are trying to provide that how the things have come into being. So, when it comes to experimental method or the observation method, through that method we are able to understand what is the present scenario, and historical method provides us dependable facts or phenomena which are needed for inquiring into the field of sociology. What is the work of a sociologist? Basically, the work of a sociologist is to compare or let us call this method anthropological method or the comparative method. This is the third method which is usually utilized whenever we are talking about the sociological aspects of social sciences. The main task of sociology, as we have seen, is to ascertain relations and interrelation between different aspects of social life. A sociologist can surely experiment in laboratory of the world by employing the comparative method. Now, what is comparative method? Comparative method means when we are comparing institutions. When we are comparing institutions, here means the social institutions. Let me give you an example. For example, like whenever we are observing different kind of groups of people, in order to find out the difference or the similarities between their way of life. To elaborate further, this method has been used by many sociologists to find out what elements in social life are functionally correlated. Taylor used this method in the study of institutions. He connected the family among the primitive people and was able to show that the practice of mother-in-law avoidance was correlated with the custom of matrilocal residence. That means in the when the primitive societies he is referring to the Asian societies only, because for the Taylor this was something which was not seen in the West, that the mother-in-law usually used to avoid the son-in-law, and similarly son-in-law would avoid mother-in-law. So, he correlated this particular practice with the custom of matrilocal residence. What is matrilocal residence? That means all those families where the husband goes to live with his wife's people, the practice of mother-in-law avoiding her son-in-law is found. Similarly, Weber also found a direct relation between the practical ethics of a community and character of its economic system. The institution of marriage, for example, has different meaning for the people of India and for Westerners. We consider it as indissoluble sacred bond of union between husband and wife, whereas the Western take it as a union of loose type, breakable at the will of either party. So, here the institution, if we compare both the institutions, they are different meaning for the society at large. Another method which is very important is inverse deductive method. Again, the J.S. Mill was the person who advocated this method, and what are the procedures which are involved? In the first place, it is assumed that there is a relation between different elements of social life. By the use of Taylor's method of tracing adhesion, we inquire what element in social life are functionally correlated. As we mentioned above, that Taylor had applied this method to the comparative and statistical study of the institutions connected with the family among the people, and showed that the practice of mother-in-law avoidance is correlated with the custom of matrilocal residence. Similarly, it has been suggested that there is some relation between industrialization and capitalism, between urbanization and disintegration of family, between war and class differentiation, and so on. The rise of nobility and the extensive development of serfdom appears to be correlated with the growth of economic system. Secondly, after finding the correlation between the institutions, we come to the study of sequencing, that is, finding whether there are any irregularities or regularities in the change of the institutions, and whether the changes in any one institutions are correlated with the changes in other institutions. We may also inquire whether changes in class structure are connected with the changes in the economic organization, or again whether the changes in the form and functions of family are connected with the changes in the economic order, in religious beliefs, or in morals. Friends, now from this we have discussed the kind of methods which are to be used by the teachers in the class, or make the students adopt those methods as to become student of social sciences. What kind of activities can we devise for our students so that they understand how these methods are to be adopted if they go for further education in social sciences, and apart from that, as we covered the pedagogical principle, to confirm or affirm that the pedagogical principles are adopted by the concerned teacher, and they are also used in her classroom. We have to find out the activities for the students. What kind of activities can we generate for the students? Friends, whenever we teach in our subjects, suppose we are talking about the job opportunities, then how to go about it? Rather than talking about the job opportunities in the market, what a teacher can do is that she can ask the students to gather data about the aspirations of the family members or a school group. Thus, research can be taken up by the students regarding range of occupations within any two organizations. What the students can do is that as to understand further what kind of job opportunities exist in the society, they can be grouped in such a manner that they visit two organizations, and after that they identify the roles and responsibilities of each occupation and compare them, giving possible reasons for any difference. For example, one group goes and study the agriculturist, another group goes and study some social sector. Say for example, another group is asked to go and visit some factory, and he or she comes out. Of course, we can't have the student going all alone. We would be sending the students in group, and after both the groups are back in the class, they can be asked to identify the various roles and responsibilities they have understood, which are correlated with the occupations which they covered, and they can also be asked to compare them and give possible reasons for any differences if they exist. Similarly, for an activity, what we can do is that we can invite a person who works in a social science. Suppose there is a person who has been awarded for being an environmentalist, then that person can be called in the school assembly, and he or she can talk to the children. Through the talk, the students will be learning how to progress in their chosen field. If there would be certain students who would like to going into the fields of becoming environmentalists, so they can be guided through the experts who are being called by the teacher in the class or in the school assemblies, so that they can share their experiences as well as journey problems. So thereby the students would be learning it. Then it is also important that we provide time during the year for the students to reflect on the skills they have to learn or they have learned in the subject by using personal journals, diaries or creative workbook. Friends, we would be further discussing the kind of activities social sciences teacher can take, so that the pedagogical principles which we have discussed in our previous lectures, they are also covered, and he or she is also able to introduce the understanding of the different kind of methods which are to be adopted for becoming a student of social sciences or being a student of social sciences. Thanks for today, and we shall be joining next time as to discuss in detail the what kind of activities which can be introduced in the class for the better understanding of students. Thank you.